What is it to be human? What is it to ache? What is it to be alive? Look for what is special about each individual. Focus on that.
Can you please welcome to the stage Charlie Kaufman, Duke Johnson, and producer Rosa Tran. I take back that I said that they were a really unappreciative audience when we were chatting over there just now. Like I said at the beginning, we're a little short on time here, so I'll just open with one question, then we'll sort of open the floor to you. It started off as a stage-read radio play, then moved into this wonderful film. Could you talk about the sort of trajectory from there to the film? All of you.
Yeah, we did it in Los Angeles for 2 performances, and my friend Dino Stamatopoulos, who I'd written with, he's a comedy writer, was in the audience. He liked the play a lot, and then he subsequently founded an animation studio called Starburns Industries, where Duke and Rosa worked, and they were looking for something to do in 2011, and they approached me about making this into a stop-motion film.
And you guys?
Yeah, for us, as he said, we were working at Starburns, and Dino Stamatopoulos is a big fan of stop motion and the medium, and had always wanted to explore more adult stories in the medium. And so it was in 2011, we were sort of in his office bouncing ideas back and forth of things that we might be able to produce next, and he mentioned that he had a copy of the script for Anomalisa. And I'm a big fan of Charlie's previous work, and I was excited to read it, and I read it and loved it, and so we approached Charlie with the idea.
And Rosa, just quickly in terms of the funding.
Duke read the script and was super excited and comes running down the hall in my office. And he's like, we have to make this into a movie. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. And so we took it out to a couple places, and traditional financing kind of just didn't work out for us. So someone suggested that we do a Kickstarter, and we gathered puppets around the studio, gathered some old sets, and put a video together. 60 days later, we raised $406,000. And that's how we got our start.
Charlie, could you talk about, was there any reticence on your part of taking a stage play or a radio play and transforming it into this animated film?
Yeah, I mean, specifically because it was designed not to be seen, or it was designed to be seen with actors sitting on stage reading, and so a lot of the play was dialogue was ambiguous and would allow for the audience to have different interpretations of what they were hearing and imagine it differently, and that would go away. So I was concerned about. I mean, I wasn't concerned about it, but I felt like that was a special part of it for me. Like, for example, what was physically wrong with Lisa is never mentioned in the dialogue. And so my thought was that everybody in the audience would have a different idea of what it was, and I thought that was kind of cool. But, you know, once it's made into a movie, you have to kind of decide what it is. So we did.
Yeah.
Okay. This question is, I got a question for Duke and Charlie. And I just want to start out with Duke. The stop motion here is it's so new, and like the style of it could be repeated at some point. And like, how did this style come to kick in? And I feel like I'm seeing some sort of 3D printing technology involved, unless I'm wrong. But like, how did you manage to construct the faces?
You're correct. 3D printed faces. How the style came about is interesting, because I sort of come from a live action background originally, and I ended up working in stop motion, and so my background's interesting in that I learned a lot about the craft of stop motion, but I wasn't particularly like married to anything or any particular way of doing it, like a lot of people in that world are. There's a lot of like sort of stop motion purists, and things have to be done a certain way. And then when working with Charlie, who doesn't have a stop motion background and was able to kind of approach it from a completely objective perspective of like, well, what do we just
ignorance. I think is what
what do we want these things to look like and what do we want them to feel like? And then we were able to kind of approach it from that standpoint and just kind of make something new. And when it came to like the things that were important to us, it was we wanted as a broader range of emotional possibilities within the performances of the faces, and that led us to a style of animation which does previously exist called replacement animation, where the faces are split across the eye. That's what that seam is across the eye, and there's top pieces and bottom pieces, and they're interchangeable. There's about 150 different brow pieces and about 150 different mouth pieces, and millions of possible combinations of the two to get the performance. And we used 3D printers to create those pieces, and we just pushed it in. Usually they're more sort of broad, cartoony styles, and we pushed it in a more naturalistic aesthetic.
Oh, nice.
Just quickly, just staying with that for a moment. In terms of that style, Charlie then writing about the fact that Michael's face actually comes off, how much did that change your way of thinking in terms of the screenplay, or both of you chatting about it, how much you sort of changed the approach?
Well, I mean, that wasn't in the original play, because so, we had this technique and we were trying to utilize it to the fullest in the production and also in the story. So we started to incorporate Michael finding the seam and Michael, and in the dream, the face falling off. We felt it was sort of thematically consistent with what we were doing. That's why we did it.
Yeah, and I had a question for Mr. Kaufman. So claymation gives this otherworldly viewpoint for the viewer to see, and it gives like this whole different reality. And like I'm still wrapping my head around it, but what could have we lost and or gained if it were live action or animation or puppetry, if you were to go to that certain extent? Like, do you think we would have found something else in a different format?
It isn't claymation, first of all. It's puppet animation. They're not clay. As Duke was saying, that they're 3D printed faces, and then the bodies are silicone. The movie would have been different if it were live action, and we didn't work on that movie. So, the process of making this movie, we kind of discovered what it was about stop motion that intrigued us and that felt fulfilling in terms of telling this story. I imagine we would have come to something else if we did it live action, but that this was the given. We were going to do it stop motion, so that's the look then and aesthetic that we developed.
There's things that that we've come to realize throughout the process of making it that we feel makes the film what it is, brought about by using stop motion, like that it gives it a certain dreamlike quality and a fractured or broken quality to the characters. There's a sense that these things are being manipulated by outside forces, which plays a part in the emotional audience experience of watching the film. And there's things like this that
you really do feel the presence of the animators in stop motion more than you would in another form of animation, because you're literally seeing it. And we kept those things, the chatter that you see in clothing and in hair, which is a result of the animators literally moving the figures and leaving their imprints. A lot of that stuff is cleaned up in most stop motion. Obviously, the seams are painted out, and we didn't want people not to know what it was that they were watching.
And of course, if you were actually filming it in live action, you wouldn't spend months filming someone performing oral sex.
Well, we would, but for different reasons.
There's a lot of union issues.
Suddenly, hands go up everywhere. We've got the person there with the glasses, and then we'll have the 4 people around here.
Yeah, it's for Mr. Kaufman. I was wondering, do you think the sort of his sort of current state of mind or condition or the way he views the world is kind of a consequence of a sort of more super modern or less personal surroundings, or do you think he sees these surroundings in this way due to sort of personal or reasons from, so I don't know, growing up, or I don't know, something that's not, like, is it due to settings or the other way around?
I mean, we don't really know much about Michael other than this is a thing that happens to him. This has happened to him more than once. It happened with Bella. It's happened with his wife, apparently, and it happens with Lisa. Why it happened, we don't like to sort of... people come to us after a movie, this movie or other things that I've written, and they have different interpretations. What it is that, there's an interaction between the movie and the person watching it that is part of for us, is part of the magic of the experience. So for me to say, well, this is why Michael is this way, and this is what it means, it sort of limits the possibility of that happening. So I'd rather sort of, leave that up to you. I'd be happy to hear what you think, but she's not going to answer that. See, it's not so easy.
Hey, Mr. Kaufman, you wrote this film yourself. Okay, that wasn't my question.
Oh, just a statement of fact.
In his defense, he just walked in.
So I've never seen a film that deals so precisely with that kind of particular mood, that kind of particular interaction of somebody sort of dipping into someone's life, using their very potent skills as a communicator to kind of just drag them from their banal existence into their world, completely change their life, and disappear again. It's something that's very powerful. It's something I've encountered personally, and it's fascinating to see it so accurately described in a movie. If I don't want to be too personal, but I'm wondering what it is that made you choose to focus on that specifically for this project. What made you write this film?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's, I mean, practically what happened was I was trying to write a radio play, a stage radio play, and I had 3 actors, and I was trying to figure out a way to do something that would have 3 actors but many characters. And I'd read about something called the Fargo delusion, which is the belief that everyone else in the world is the same person. And I thought that was metaphorically interesting for, not that the character of Michael literally suffers from that, but that metaphorically it struck me as something that was sort of important to explore. And this, I thought it was interesting to use this one actor who doesn't change his voice to play these many characters. I mean, I think that there are certainly things that speak to me about I wouldn't write it if it didn't speak to me about the world that, I inhabit and what I see and what I feel. But to be more specific than that doesn't really sort of goes back to the previous question. I'd rather sort of leave this for someone else to experience.
So I guess my question is how, because it's such a technical process, having to create the 3D models and model all the different types of faces and have them ready and pre-plan. How did you keep the idea of performance and sort of balance it out with this planning process that has to happen with being able to capture so many frames in a day and, for the sort of time it takes to actually produce it, but also keep the sort of magic of the ambiguity that's in your writing and in the story? How did you find that process when you're directing, both of you?
Yeah, well, we didn't actually pre-visualize the performances in the computer. Like, sometimes that is done in the 3D printing process in stop motion. What we did was we printed sort of a master set of options. That's why we didn't, animate. I mean, it's more cost effective to do it the way we did it as well, but you can possibly, do the entire face as one piece and pre-visualize the entire performance. But we split it down the middle and you have a set of brows and a set of mouths, and there's, not an infinite number of possibilities of options for the animator, but very, very many, a broad range of options. So we still felt like we could discover the performance and give the animator the opportunity to discover the performance. And there's a lot of steps along the process. So we record the actors doing the voice performances, and we film them, and we have their physical performances as a reference. And then the animators themselves and Charlie and I act things out as reference as well, to see the physicality and just to feel the staging, because these are things that sort of actors in live action just kind of intuitively do, or you figure out on set when you're blocking and rehearsing. You do that to figure out the staging of the scene and how the camera is going to interact with the characters. And then you go through that process again when you're talking to the animators, because the animators are actors themselves and bring a whole other element to it. And you cast animators just as you would actors based on their sensibilities and their strengths and weaknesses or whatever. And then all of that sort of comes together with the writing and the conversations that we have about the purpose of the scene and the emotion of the characters, and the performance is what you get.
And so much of the basis for the emotion, the consistency of the emotional understanding among all the people working on it is the voice records. That's sort of like, that's the thing that everybody keeps going back to, that informs the animators, it informs the production design, it informs us and our choices, and it keeps it alive, because that's done first.
On the subject of voices, a lot of animated films bring actors in at different points in time to record their piece and go, this feels much more organic. Did you just have a few takes with everyone together, or?
Yeah, we did it in 2 days with all the actors together.
We have one of our animators here, by the way. I see him in the audience, Sergio Lara. He's wearing an orange jumper. He animated the sex shop scene. Stand up, Sergio. He's shy.
Hi. Thank you. I had a question about just the specific process. When did you have a locked animatic, and then what was your shooting schedule like, and the art department schedule, and how is that a creative / budget dilemma?
How long have we got?
Yeah.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. So it starts out, we do the voice records first, and then from that we do storyboards. So we had, and if I get too in depth, just nudge me. We had 3 storyboard artists, and they did 3 script pages a day. So Duke will go through and do thumbnails, goes over it with Charlie. Then we give direction to the board artists. They go through all that. Then once the boards are done, they get handed over to the editor, and he starts cutting it together along with the radio play, which is all the voice records underneath. That whole process was probably about 2 months. Other features have, maybe like a year. We were really short on time. What was the second part of the question? Production schedule. We had, at the height of production, we had 18 stages and 13 animators, and their quota was about 2 seconds a day, which is about 48 frames per animator. The sex scene, the first portion of the sex scene, took about 6 months to animate. That animator was turning in about 9 frames a day. Sometimes on a really good day, maybe 22 frames a day, but then he would get cut back and start all over again. But
and did he bill you for his therapy sessions as well during this period?
He curses while he animates, so that's his own therapy, yeah.
We had some people there, actually 2 people there, and then we'll come down here if we have time.
For Charlie, coming from such an established background and coming into a relatively new studio like Starburns, along with a Kickstarter, was that something that you found tentative, or was it more liberating?
I was trying to get something made for, 7 years at that point. So I was throwing stuff against the wall, seeing what would stick. And this was just one more thing. And it really was the thing I probably least expected to happen. It is the one thing that did happen. So, I guess you never know. They said they wanted to do it. I said, if you could raise money, have at it. And they got it going. And then a few things fell into place. We got more money, so more financing, so we were able to continue when the Kickstarter money ran out. And in the end, I feel really proud of this, because we did it outside of the system and because I couldn't get stuff made, and we did something anyway. And, it was hard. It was really hard. It was especially hard for these guys and for the animators. And but there was a tenacity there that ended up being something that I'm very proud to be part of.
We had someone behind.
At the end of like watching a film at the cinema, like a sea of voices always begins, and at the end of the film there was this sea of voices as well, and it was indistinguishable, and it was horrible, and it made me laugh, and then the screen voices laughed as well, and then I became indistinguishable. Because you must go to a lot of these Q&As, and you're probably at the back waiting to come on. How does it feel to be in the sea of voices every single time?
I mean, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because we love that about the movie. And when I think, you know, like a lot of times in the U.S., this movie is playing to an empty house, and I imagine then you're really probably aware of what we're doing there. But when we see it, it's usually because we're here and because it's an event. There's usually a lot of people, and I don't know if the audience can hear it. And we have this discussion: do they even know, or did they just think that's more voices from them? And so I'm thrilled that you heard it. And how do I feel about? I'm not Michael, you know. I don't feel that way about people, or at least I don't usually. And I try not to. And you know, I mean, I think that this movie is such a sort of a testament to the individuality of people, because it's such a collaboration, and there's so many people whose voices are in the movie. I mean, Sergio and all the animators, all these people. I mean, so many people played Michael, you know, and so many people played Lisa, and so many people played all these other parts, including the voice actors. And I just think it's sort of, there's something really cool about that. And the movie exists in the form it does, and whatever is good about this movie is because of that, you know, not in spite of that. So, I don't know.
I've got a signal. We have time for one more question. Someone's been gesticulating wildly there.
Hi, I've got a question for Charlie. You just said that you couldn't get anything made, and that makes me feel really sad. Do you think that it's becoming harder to make an interesting individual film like this in America?
For me, yeah.
Or just generally for, you know, for anyone.
You know, I mean, I think it's harder for everybody, yeah, but I think it's harder for me than anybody else.
Why?
Because I have to live with it. You know, I'm sure that they have their own problems, but who cares? No, I mean, you know, yeah, it's harder. I mean, everything changed after 2008 for everybody. When the economy kind of plummeted, it was sort of a disaster for the film business and the studio. I mean, we made the movie Adaptation at Sony, not Sony Classics, not some sort of branch of Sony. We made it at Sony, and I've been to Sony twice since then with scripts. And, you know, Amy Pascal was the head of Sony, and I loved her, and she would always hire me to write these things, but they would never make them, you know, because they couldn't. And she would say, you know, I mean, I was told that, you know, if they can't figure out what the commercial is, you know, this is all figured out by the marketing department. The marketing department decides, basically, what gets made. And I think that's become more and more the case, and so there's less and less room for quirky things or small things, or you know, and then the movie business is changing, and theaters are going away, and, you know, save Curzon's theater. I know I'm supposed to say that, so save it. But, you know, yeah, so I don't know what's happening in the business. I don't feel like things are easier for me now after this. You know, the movie didn't do well. I mean, it did really well critically, but, you know, it didn't do well in the United States in terms of box office. So that doesn't change anything. No one's going to give me a lot of money now, or a little money, you know.
And this film barely got made. Like it, yeah. like we never had all the money until the very end. Like it was I mean, Rosa, you know, what a nightmare it was for her. But like, we would run out of money and not be able to pay our crew, and then have to try to scramble. I mean, then I agree with you. I thought the same thing. I mean, this is Charlie Kaufman. I mean, he's made some of the greatest films in cinematic history, and so.
Rosa had to hide the bottled water during production, because everything was coming. All the people were coming to take their stuff back. Literally, we couldn't pay for the water.
Repo Men came for the water.
However, I will say, like, that singular voice that stands out for an individual that seems so different from everything else. The world is a much more interesting place for you in it. and the films that you make with all your collaborators.
I'm glad I came tonight. Holy cow.
This film opens on March 11th. Please tell everyone, people on the street, when you go out now, to come and see this film when it opens. And can you please join me in thanking our guests?
Thank you so much.
Our time is limited, we forget that.